Hello, I'm Nobby Clark. I'd like to welcome you to my workshop. Following my last video where I showed you some improvements I've made to my mini mill, I'd like to show you some small improvements I've made to my very inexpensive bench drill or pillar drill. I'd like to point out first though that along with the mini mill and the bench drill here, a lot of these improvements are not my own invention. I've copied some of these from other YouTubers' ideas. Some of the upgrades I've made to the bench drill were gained from a YouTube channel I watched, Steve Jordan. I would highly recommend watching Steve's YouTube channel. He has the most excellent videos and tool reviews. A very expert machinist, obviously with a long background in engineering. Anyway, the bench drill, I could initially only afford to buy a quite inexpensive bench drill. This one is branded Guild. I think they're made probably by the same factory as many others, just with different names on for export. I'd like at some point to have a much better bench drill, but this one has worked extremely well for me. It's done everything I've wanted it to do, but there were some improvements I really wanted to make. The first, I absolutely hated the key chuck that came with the drill. I much prefer keyless chucks, so I purchased this version. It will take drills from 1 to 13 millimeters and fits directly into the spindle of the bench drill, and it works incredibly well. It's absolutely perfect for my use. The only problem is that by adding this type of chuck is that you do lose some height to the column, which can restrict you slightly. So I copied what Steve Jordan had done in making an extension here. This is made out of aluminium bar. I machined it so that it would drop into the top of the column. It's secured with a couple of Allen screws, and the again machined so the head of the bench drill would just drop on top, and that takes up the problems I had with the actual height. I do tend to use the depth stop on the drill quite often, and normally it has a couple of screws or nuts rather that run on this threaded bar here. The problem is that originally when you purchase these drills, this plate here is made out of plastic and normally takes the chuck guard, which I removed immediately because it just gets in the way of usage. So I bought a piece of aluminium plate, machined a hole in it, cut a slot in here so that it slips onto the quill and is just held in place with a screw which goes through the two plates, squeezing it together. Then I remounted the depth stop into that metal plate so that when you reach the depth you've set, it doesn't flex the plate and give you different readings every time. Now to use as a stop system, I got really fed up with screwing these two nuts up and down the bar. This is a very fine pitched 10mm thread. So I copied an idea which I'd seen on YouTube. There's a product made like this. It's two sprung-loaded plates, sprung with a sort of spring inside here, and the hole here is threaded the same as this thread on the depth stop, so that it can be clamped around and just drops in place and gives you your depth stop. The problem is that if you want to buy one of these, it normally comes with a much bigger hole and thread in here. It's obviously made for big milling machines like Bridgeports or very, very big bench drills. So I actually made this item. It did take me about a day to make it, and it took me a while to work out how to actually hold the spring inside here, but it's a very, very worthwhile device and just drops in place. It's a lovely thing to use, but there is actually a much simpler way of doing this. If you just make yourself an aluminium ring out of a bar with a hole in it of the same diameter, 10mm, with a locking screw that just clamps in here, but remembering that on the end of the screw to put a little brass insert so that you don't damage the thread on here, and that simply drops into place. You adjust this to the depth you want and then just lock that in place, and that will give you the same adjustment every time. Another perfect way of doing it. As with my milling machine, I use these sewing machine lights. Always need a lot of light in here, particularly when you're trying to line centre drills or drills up to tiny marks on the workpiece. These are magnetic, so they can actually be attached anywhere on any machine in your workshop, and on a swan neck arm here you can position them any place you like. The other big problem is with these inexpensive drill presses is that if you're putting anything rather weighty on the plate here, that the plate will flex and will give you a hole drilled at a slight angle, which is no use at all. So the ideal way of getting around this is to put a support underneath. Now, Steve Jordan recommended using a thing called a scissor jack from a car. I haven't got access to one of those. The only thing is that scissor jacks will stick out on each side quite a lot, and I thought they might get in the way. But what I did have from the first car I ever owned was a bottle jack. This is so old that it no longer works as a pneumatic jack anymore. So I just use the screw part of this so that can be adjusted to the appropriate height, and then you just bring the plate down and that will hold it very, very firmly in place, and you can make small adjustments to it. Now, there are obviously situations where you're using this plate fairly close to the chuck and you actually run out of height of the screw here, so I just use this huge block of plastic that can go underneath the jack and give me another range for use. Now, means that when you're using vices on here to hold the workpieces, and when I use a very old machinist vice that I bought on eBay, this on its own is an incredible weight. It's very, very solid steel, but an absolute delight to use. It's very, very accurate, but putting that on there alone is adding a terrific load to the plate here, and it is likely to cause some movement. I've got a couple of different vices I use. This is one that I'd originally bought to use on my milling machine. I didn't really find it very good at all, but it works perfectly well to hold work on the bench drill. So I alternate, I can use both of these, and I can have two bits of work in two different vices at the same time if required. Another very simple device I've made, because I do some woodwork, not very much, but there are occasions where you want to clamp a workpiece to the top plate. So I bought one of these simple clamping devices. I've mounted it onto a block of aluminium. It's just fixed on here with a wing nut, and I can drop that through one of the slots here. I'll show you underneath. If I can locate the wing nut, that can be locked in place, and you can use that to lock workpieces in. You can swing that round slightly as well, different angles. This threaded part can be adjusted for different thicknesses of material. These are incredibly inexpensive to buy. I bought, I think, about 4 or 5 of them for a few pounds. I'm only using one so far, but it's a very, very useful device to have on the bench drill. Another tiny thing I've added is that I don't really need to change the belt speed very much, as I'm mostly working with metal. I tend to use the bench drill at its lowest speed, but to lift the top plate here, it had a screw in the side here, which you've got to unscrew and then screw back in. I found it much easier just to make a little screw-in knob that goes in here, just with a knurled end that can be screwed in and out very, very easily, finger tight. It's perfect for the job. One silly addition was adding base of a tobacco tin to the column with a U-clamp, so I can store various bits and pieces in there so that I don't lose the parts. Even the original nut and indicator I can put those in there as well if I ever want to put them back on again. So all these things just make life so much easier in the workshop and make it a joy to use. So even though I think I only paid something like about £50 originally for this bench drill, it served me incredibly well. But anyway, thank you very much for joining me again. I hope to put some more videos up and show you other bits of machinery in the workshop, and eventually some of the things that I've made in the workshop as well. Well, cheerio for now. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye.